Greetings, welcome back to the Black Pill. We're in part 5 of Is It Okay? Should We Offend People? And this is called Counter Protest and Absurdism, where birds aren't real. It's a little diversion, but let's go. We start with OK Boomer. So, Gen Z and younger millennials were educated differently than their parents and grandparents. What we've done in America over time is gradually improve the quality of education for everyone. Drives some people crazy, but that's it. That's what's happening. In the past, you would have been expected to know the names of the states and their capitals, and in the present, you're expected to know geopolitics. People are learning reasoning skills and logic, and also empathy, and putting all those things together in a way that wasn't really happening in the 50s and 60s in America. So every generation really has believed that the generation coming up after them, and especially two generations after, are just lost. They've lost their moral compass, and they're going to bring society down, and everything's going to collapse because we're not doing it the way that we used to do it. Half of the Socratic dialogues are Socrates, man, complaining that young people have lost their moral compass. And in the 20s, old people thought that flappers with their beaded purses and bobbed haircuts and cigarettes were going to destroy society. And then those are the people who thought that baby boomers would destroy society, and they were kind of right about that one. And baby boomers allegedly thought it was millennials, but mostly because Fox News kept telling them to think that. And then in a second, millennials are going to start bagging on Gen Z for losing their way. But it's not true that every generation is less and less moral. Yeah, it's true that every generation is more moral, more capable of reasoning, and therefore more capable of moral reasoning. Okay, so like 60 and up, those folks are pretty authoritarian because that's how they were raised. And people 50 and under tend to be pretty anti authority because that's how they were raised. We were raised to think for ourselves, but using logic and reason. There we go. My kid, when he was 15, started bringing me math problems I'd never seen before. I went to college. Like, we didn't do calculus in high school when I was a young man. I quit college math when they started trying to tell me that circles were made of triangles. Like, I'm out at that point. I'm down at trigonometry. I'm out. Young people are smarter than older people. And this is, in some ways, literally true. Depending what you think IQ tests measure, that's a topic for another day. But James Flynn discovered the tendency for IQ scores to rise by about 3 points per decade in a population. Not that my IQ will be 3 points higher 10 years from now, but that our IQs as Americans will be higher by about 3 points 10 years from now. Exactly because the young people are getting education that teaches them the skills that the IQ test measures, which he's going to say are the ability to take the hypothetical seriously, to abstract things into categories, to use reason on those abstractions. Okay, and that's what we're learning. So young people start going to Thanksgiving dinner, and it's like it's 2015, 2016, and the whole Trump thing is going, and it doesn't make any sense. It's completely contrary to all the values that we've learned from our grandparents, from people my parents' age. That, for example, all people are created equal. All people are created equal. Everyone deserves a chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. If you work hard, you can make it. And then here's Trump saying Mexicans are rapists. It doesn't jibe, and everything he says after that is worse than that. And grandma is into it. She's into it. And it doesn't make any sense. And then the young folks might try and start arguing, trying to reach some rational level of understanding, but all of grandma's understanding is based on things that aren't facts. They're lies. They're obvious lies. You know? Grandma, do you really believe Mexicans are rapists? Well, some of them are, but that's not what he said. You know, the rate of violent crime among immigrants is much lower than the rate of crime among citizens because immigrants are afraid they'll be deported. Well, I don't believe that, but it's true, and there's no argument. There's no argument to be had. There's no argument to be had, and so Gen Z folks just started saying, "Okay, Boomer," and then moving on. Get on with your life. There's pushback. There always is. In the last video, I told you that people will sort of sock puppet. They'll get on the platforms and whatever and pose as people from minority groups or younger groups or whatever group they're trying to infiltrate and break. And they'll go on there, pose as Gen Z people and go, well, that's ageist, isn't it? My grandma's not like that. And so you're saying all grandmas are racists. You're just as bad. And you're not just as bad. You're walking away from an argument. Hashtag not all boomers. So, okay, boomer is ageist and calling people Karens is sexist somehow. And, yeah. Even I'm a racist freak, okay? All right, fine. So, Black Lives Matter 2020. I was out there in my town. There were rookie organizers, props to them, proper respect to them for getting something going, with no experience of organizing movements, anything like that. They got a few hundred people moving around safely with water and medics and all of that. And it was all right. They were rookies, and so there were elements that more experienced organizers might have relegated to the sidelines. You got to stand on the stage. And they were, just the usual crazies and whatever. But mostly it was peaceful, it was demonstrative, it was pretty effective. And then the Nazis showed up. Nazis, fascists, racist militia groups. Heavily armed conspiracy theorists who believed shit like only 3% of the colonists fought the British and won, and that kind of stuff. The racist militia people, you know who they are. Initially, they approached the organizers and said, we're here to protect you against Antifa. We're here to protect your First Amendment rights. And the organizers were like, yeah, cool, come on. Everyone's welcome here. Everyone means everyone. Everyone's welcome here. And they didn't look at the yellow badges and whatever, and they didn't go in the Google and see who these guys were. And if they might not have done anything differently. And it made things very confusing in sort of the after actions when we're talking to our families about, I was at this rally and white racist dudes with guns pointed guns at us. That is not a part of civil protest. And then our racist sisters-in-law would be like, but the protest organizers welcomed them. They were invited. And like, no, they were, yeah, but no, but it's very confusing. But it's also not that confusing when you know what happened. So they told the organizers they were there to protect First Amendment rights, whatever. They seemed like guys who'd be into that. But when the actual people, started confronting these guys or asking them questions, they really confessed very quickly and openly that they were there to shoot Antifa. They'd heard right-wing politicians saying that Black Lives Matter was full of Antifa and everything's full of Antifa and Antifa's going to burn down your house and whatever, and they're communists and all that. And so what they really meant by we're here to protect your First Amendment rights is if you set fire to anything, or spray paint a wall or break a window, we're going to shoot you. That is, they were there to keep the protesters in line, not to protect protesters. That's a euphemism. They were there to keep the protesters in line. Police didn't do anything. And I wish they had done something. This attitude by the law that people have the First Amendment right to free association and the Second Amendment right to carry very dangerous weapons into public leads to the whole Kyle Rittenhouse saga. And if in 2020 they had decided that in fact this isn't safe and these guys are here to make trouble and done something, anything to push them back, then Kyle Rittenhouse wouldn't have been there at that time. We could have saved lives. But the police did nothing. They did nothing. Not even about the young guy dressed in full police regalia, everything but insignia, cosplaying a police officer. He's obviously looking to join the force so that he can harass some black people. Later, a couple days into the rally, when this stuff is blown up and it's, well, some older organizers kind of take over. Some more experienced baby boomer aged organizers get in there and kind of push the crazies out to the periphery, and they just walk up to the Nazis and they're like, "You guys are out of here. Fuck out of here. You're not welcome." And to my amazement, they go. To my amazement, they actually leave. They are no longer integrated with this group. They don't stand at the outside. What they do is climb a parking structure and sit on the roof, overwatching us with their long weapons. Police did nothing about that either. Did nothing about that. Is there anything they could do? I'm not sure, but I know they didn't do anything. So I had staked out a position where if someone was going to drive a car through peaceful protesters like they did at Charleston, they'd probably have to drive through me. I picked out the spot that was the only realistic approach, and I stood there for 3 days. And while I was standing there, I was thinking about this old Louis C.K. bit. Yeah, that Louis C.K. Look, man, some of the most insightful and brilliant and funny people are the sickest and most broken, and that's the thing we have to deal with. It's a thing we have to deal with. But let's go, Louis C.K. It's Linky Dinky down there. About 2.5 minutes of this bit, and it's a bit about CK is sitting in traffic, and there's a bunch of cars in front of him. There's nowhere to go. And the guy behind him is like mad at him in particular, as though he could go if he wanted, And so the dude actually gets out of his car and comes to yell at Louis through the car window, and he's thinking, what am I going to say to this guy? Like, what am I going to say that's going to convince him that he's actually in the wrong and I'm not to blame? It's obvious this is not an element of reality that he's mad at. There's something off. So I'm going to have my own argument. And he goes, the guy starts yelling at him, why don't you drive? Why don't you drive? Just go, you ass, you idiot. But there's nowhere to go. And rather than explain that, cars are made of matter and my car's made of matter and two things can't occupy the same space, instead he looks at the dude and goes, yeah, and give me back my jacket. I said you could borrow it, not have it. And the lights come on. The guy suddenly gets scared and starts backing away. Like, wait, this dude is not. Well, first of all, he's not scared. Second of all, he's not in his. You know what I mean? So he starts backing away. Gets back in his own car. It's just a story. Did it happen? I don't know. Should we let Louis C.K. back in polite society now? Probably not. Probably not. If I had more time and more resources and just a little more courage, I would love to go to the white power rallies, the Trump rallies, the pro-Confederacy, pro-gun, anti-abortion, stop the steal, climate change is a hoax rally, dressed as a clown on stilts, with a huge sign bearing a picture of an erect penis. The militia guys said that we, the BLM protesters, have the First Amendment rights of free assembly and free association. They were right. And they said they also have those exact same rights. And if we have the right to say Black Lives Matter, they have the right to stand across from us on the street corner with M16s. And they are right. They're right about that. And if they have the right to stand among us with their M16s, then I have the right to stand among them with a gigantic dildo I bought on Amazon that I handle in the way that they handle their guns while dressed as a clown. I never got around to it. I think I'm doing good where I am, and I'm not going to take that unnecessary risk right now. God, it'd be funny. Would it be effective? Birds aren't real. Birds aren't real. Linky dinky. This is a satirical movement. In the beginning of the Vice bit that I'm linking, Peter McIndoe says he was walking past a rally one day, and he just always had the idea for a skit where someone shows up to a rally to protest something completely different. They're not in on it. They're their own thing, doing their own thing. They don't understand why no one else understands. And so there's a board laying on the ground, and he flips it over. It's blank on the back. And he grabs a pen and he writes, "Birds aren't real." It's just 3 words pop into his head. No reason. Birds aren't real. And he runs with it. He walks around and people start asking, well, what does that mean? And he spontaneously, improvises a conspiracy theory that the government in 1959 systematically killed all of the birds in the world and replaced them with drones, and they've been spying on you and whatever. They charge up on power lines. That's why birds sit on power lines and all of that. Most conspiracy theories, when you think about them for 15 seconds, are really dumb. They're these extemporaneous arguments, It's really the rhetorical skill of convincing someone that their truth is wrong and your falsehood might be right. There it is. And so he came up with this whole thing in 3 minutes. I don't know what the rally was. Like, my worry is that Gen Z might be so used to seeing protests and counter-protests that they fall into the everything is equal-ism, the both sides-ism, and the fascists win in both sides-ism because we don't feel strong enough to vote against them. It's not that you get Democratic voters to vote for Republicans. It's that you get independent voters to stay home. And then you can win. So I don't know what the rally was. It might have been Black Lives Matter. It might have been a Trump thing. He didn't disclose, not in the Vice thing. And he didn't set out to make any particular political point. He was just funning. It was like he sees this thing and it strikes him as weird. And the way to process it is to get in there, make fun of people by being equally dumb from his point of view. It was funny. But then Birds Aren't Real started to get big because people wanted to also join in that fun. And, no one in Birds Aren't Real seems to believe the story that birds aren't real. They're there for the satire. And that got big enough that McIndoe could live on t-shirt sales. And then people started telling him what it was. They started explaining to him what satire is, because he didn't know, apparently. And that this is a satire, and maybe it could get work done. So, could it be that if some QAnon, boogaloo, white power a-holes stage a rally saying Joe Biden is a reptiloid alien communist and the birds aren't real people come and join the protest, would it take some wind out of the sails? To my knowledge, that is untested. To my knowledge, that's untested. Last part, self-owning. Ian Danskin suggests these groups eventually discredit themselves. They show up, they're identified with a specific organization, with a leadership and someone in charge. They say really unpopular things, and they get driven off, like the Westboro Baptist people. Or they do some murders, like Charleston, and they drive a car through a crowd and they kill a human being. And then association with them suddenly becomes toxic and the organization collapses. So pairing them with absurdism isn't necessary or effective. The movement today, what Danskin refers to as the alt-right, at least today, is decentralized. It's online. There is no organization, no figureheads to discredit. But maybe there's value in fake conspiracy theories anyway, showing the rest of us how these people think. And maybe there isn't, because Flat Earth really begins as a rhetorical skill honing movement. And it really demonstrates that you can argue for the truth of anything if you're invested in it. And the first batch of flat earthers didn't believe in the flat earth. There's some evidence that current flat earthers largely don't believe in a flat earth. They're trolls and they're honing their rhetorical skills. Right? So there's that, but maybe there's value. I've said in a previous video, you can't talk crazies out of crazy. Shall I link that? Possibly. And you can't talk grandma out of the Republican Party, because it's not your ideas against her ideas. It's your educated frontal lobe view of the world, where you abstract things into categories and use reason on abstractions, versus her authoritarian view and the authoritarians who are constantly filling her with rage and misinformation. If you get through to her with an argument now, 15 minutes from now, the voices constantly beaming into her head through her phone and her television are just going to fill up her limbic system with rage and push all the ideas out. Your frontal lobe can never reach her limbic system, because it's pickling every day in a sour brine of Fox News and their online outreach arms. But you can reach all the reachable people. The more people know how conspiracy theories work, the less they'll fall for them in the future. And, Gen Z seems to be facing down this world where there doesn't seem to be a future. Fascism, climate change, and pandemic, with the rich getting richer and the rest of us just dying. The right's struggle to control voting, information, to create a one-party system, is exactly because they're outnumbered now by younger, more educated, better educated people who see through their bullcrap.